Lucia, it's 10 o'clock. I think we can go ahead and get started.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our session on lessons from major multimodal projects. My name is Lucia Ramirez. I'm a principal planner in the Policy Data and Analysis Division, and I'll be your moderator today. But we'll start off with a few basics. The session is being recorded and it will be posted to the Fall Forum SharePoint page next week or so. Please remember to keep yourself on mute whenever you're not speaking. And for questions, please use Slido for questions to the moderator. I will look at the questions and direct them to our presenters at the end of our time. And please use Slido for that. Open your web browser, go to slido.com and enter event #Slido. And that will get you into our session. And if you have technical questions, you can use the chat box and our technical host will help you out. So we have 3 speakers today, and they're going to talk to us about major projects in the Portland area with an emphasis on multimodal coordination and lessons that we can take out for the rest of the state. So our 3 speakers are Della Mosier. She is the Deputy Director of the Urban Mobility Office. She's an engineer who brings more than 20 years of experience in transportation in the public and private sectors. Megan Channell is the Project Director for the I-5 Rose Quarter Improvement Project in ODOT's Urban Mobility Office. She has 14 years experience as a transportation planner in the public and private sectors. Kerrie Franey is a planner with the Region 1 Major Projects team. She's recently joined ODOT about a year ago from the City of Portland. Now, these 3 speakers will talk to us about multimodal projects and lessons learned from their projects.
All right, Lucia, thank you for that. With that, are you able to bring the PowerPoint up on screen?
That's probably a question for Sally.
There we go. All right. And just I guess a point of correction, Della was unfortunately not able to be here with us today. So we are lucky enough to have Brendan Finn, who is the director of our Urban Mobility Office, joining us today in her place. So thank you and welcome, Brendan.
Yes, welcome, Brendan. Thank you for filling in.
So good morning, everybody. I'm Megan Channell, again, the project director for the I-5 Rose Corner Improvement Project. If you go to the next slide, I'm going to share some kind of early lessons learned on the Rose Quarter project. So I could almost spend a whole session talking about what the project is, so I'll have to refrain myself here, but quick overview for those that are new. The I-5 Rose Quarter Improvement Project is located in Region 1 in the city of Portland, and adds auxiliary lanes and shoulders to reduce congestion and improve safety on I-5. But equally important to those highway improvements that are addressing safety and operations really are the multimodal local street improvements and the new community connections that are going to be provided by the project. It includes redesigning overpasses as highway covers over I-5, building a new pedestrian and bicycle bridge for a new community connection, enhancing public spaces, and promoting economic development opportunities. So we're still really early in the project development. We're at about 15% design. So I know that we have many more lessons to learn in front of us, but today I'll share with you some of our early learnings that we've had over the past couple of years that have gotten us to the 15% design mark. So staying on this same slide here, the I-5 Rose Quarter Improvement Project is named as one of the key projects in House Bill 2017 to address statewide congestion. And as part of House Bill 2017, one of the requirements was a project cost to complete report to help define what it will take to fund and finance the project. And we delivered this cost to complete report to the Joint Committee on Transportation just earlier this year to fulfill that legislative requirement. But during this, we learned a key lesson. So our step to prepare the cost to complete report was to update the preliminary cost estimate that was prepared prior to 2017, when House Bill 2017 was passed, to really reflect the current project delivery schedule and our known design information. So one key lesson that we learned through this is the importance of including inflation in mega project cost estimating. So the original 2017 estimate was developed before we had or even understood what our project delivery schedule would be, what our program year would be. Again, it was before we had the legislative direction from House Bill 2017 to move forward with designing and constructing the project. And so with all of these unknown, the original preliminary estimate was assumed in kind of the current dollars at the time, so 2017 dollars, and did not account for inflation. So fast forward to 2020, when we are preparing the refined cost estimate as part of the cost to complete report, we now knew legislative expectations, our project delivery schedule, and so we updated the cost to incorporate the new information that we had learned, new context, and also to account for inflation to our midpoint of construction, so 2025. So this resulted in a change of our original estimate from $450 million to $550 million to $715 to $795 million, half of which that increase was just due to inflation alone. So as others are working on their cost estimates, I will share that lesson learned from the Rose Quarter team that as you are doing your cost estimates, even as preliminary as they are, especially for mega projects, it's better to assume a program year and account for some level of inflation in our project estimating. Next lesson, next slide here that we have learned in Rose Quarter through our project development is about, I guess it stems from our environmental review process and the value that independent peer reviews can bring to our work. So during the environmental review process for Rose Quarter, we received a number of comments on our environmental document, and a lot of those that really involved kind of a lack of belief in the air quality, noise, and greenhouse gas evaluations that were done as part of the project's environmental assessment. And so the environmental assessment and the technical analyses found that the project would have a benefit to air quality, noise, and greenhouse gas emissions because with auxiliary lanes and shoulders is helping to address operations, improving traffic flow, less stop and go traffic on I-5. And the project would also be adding sound walls near some sensitive receptors to improve the noise condition in the area. But with that, we still got a number of comments around those topics. And so given these comments, the Oregon Transportation Commission directed our team to conduct an independent peer review of our environmental assessment around air quality, noise, greenhouse gas, to assess the adequacy of the analyses and the findings, and also to learn how our project could further address concerns during design and construction. So through this, we hired a neutral facilitator. We brought in 6 national experts across the country, private sector, public sector, in air quality, noise, sustainability, and community building to conduct this evaluation. And it was a really productive effort. You know, it's always hard to be vulnerable and put your work out there, but the benefits that you get from a peer review are huge to either course correct as needed or help provide some innovative ideas. And our peer review provided really greater credibility to our analysis in finding that the panel found and concluded that our evaluation and findings were in fact appropriate for the project and the environmental process. And so this also helped us debunk some misinformation about the project effects. And the peer review panel did find that our environmental document, yes, it could have been more reader friendly, and this is something that we'll carry forward into our future documents. We also learned from the peer review panel about a number of innovative measures that we wouldn't have otherwise to incorporate into our future design and construction phases that we're working to advance as part of the project. And we're also taking the same peer review approach for the project's highway cover design. So we have a team of architectural, engineering, urban design, and real estate experts that are independently assessing the design potential and specifically what can go on top of the new highway covers that the project will be building. So this work will be carrying through spring of next year, and we're really excited and anxious to see the findings of that work. So again, key lesson here is in projects, embrace the power of peer reviews, getting outside independent assessments, helping move our projects forward in innovative ways, and also help us build some unforeseen partnerships along the way. All right, and then the next lesson that we have learned specifically on Rose Quarter is the importance of understanding the historic context of your project area. So for those that don't know, Rose Quarter is in the central portion of City of Portland. And when I-5 was originally constructed in the 1960s in Portland, I-5, along with other public and private developments, really displaced and disconnected the African-American community from Albina, from the central core of City of Portland. And so understanding and acknowledging this history and the impact that ODOT and the construction of I-5 had in decimating that community has been critical in how we move forward, really to make sure that we do not exacerbate the harms of the past and that we build partnerships for the future and how our transportation infrastructure can not only improve the multimodal transportation needs, but support and catalyze community rebuilding. And in the case of Rose Quarter, for us, elevating the voices of the historically harmed African-American community has been central to our work and helping us shape the outcomes for this area. We have a lot of work to do, no doubt. We have a lot of learning to do, but we'll continue to, in acknowledging and understanding this history, continue our intentional efforts to engage the historic Albina community and other environmental justice communities in our work moving forward. We also know that through this work, we've heard that the community, in order to trust us, they're going to trust our actions over our words. And so making sure that based on our project values and our agency values, that we are focused on actions that incorporate the feedback that we've heard. So with this, to date, we've developed our contracting specifications based on input directly from the minority contracting community. This has helped us set up a DBE, disadvantaged business enterprise, goal range of 18 to 22% for our upcoming contractor. It has helped us stand up our community advisory groups, including an executive steering committee for regional and state leadership that includes community-based organizations, a community oversight advisory committee bringing in leaders from minority contracting community to advise us on our DBE and workforce program, and then the stand-up of the Historic Albina Advisory Board, which is critical to, again, elevating voices of individuals with ties to the Albina community, helping us advise on project design. We've also hired a number of community leaders of color on our project team to help guide our work and help us build stronger relationships with the community as we move forward. So it's these types of actions that have, I think, helped us and will continue to help us with that meaningful engagement and will be paramount in how we do our work moving forward. And last but not least for me is a bus on shoulder opportunity. So next slide, please. So, you know, project design, one key lesson learned is be flexible. We knew that with the design of adding shoulders to I-5 as part of the project, that was going to be critical from a safety perspective, providing space for emergency responders, but also a critical opportunity for transit. And so this is a good segue for me to turn it over to Kerrie, who's going to talk a little bit more about Bus on Shoulder program and lessons learned there. So thank you.
Thanks, Megan. Next slide, please. Once again, my name is Kerrie Franey. I'm going to be talking about how major projects turned Bus on Shoulder from a concept into a reality and lessons learned during the process. Next slide, please. Bus on Shoulder is not a new initiative in the transit world, but it is new to Oregon. The concept is that permitted transit lines may utilize certain segments of the freeway shoulder to bypass congested traffic. This isn't a free-for-all for any bus to utilize any freeway shoulder at any time, but rather a number of designed corridors with specific transit agency partnerships. Next slide, please. There are three factors that make for a perfect bus-on-shoulder corridor: congestion, the physical conditions of the freeway, and demand. To assess congestion, ODOT looked to an internal traffic performance report that identifies bottlenecks. It is important to note that buses are only permitted to use the shoulder if mainline speeds fall below 35 miles per hour. Therefore, while many parts of the freeway may be capable of fitting a bus on either the inner or outer shoulder, if there is not regular congestion, it would not be utilized. To assess the physical conditions, ODOT used TransGIS and an in-house assessment of pavement depth and shoulder elements such as manholes and drainage grates to identify freeway shoulders capable of handling regular bus traffic. And finally, ODOT examined external reports and met with partner transit agencies to discuss areas of interest and existing service lines that use Portland's freeways. Next slide, please. Over a month or so, I took all of our existing TransGIS data, including elements such as shoulder width and ramp location, matched it with congestion data such as bottlenecks and ramp volumes, and finally overlaid auxiliary lanes and multi-lane ramps to create graphics like the one on the left for Portland's 200 freeway, including both the inner and outer shoulder. The large purple-hued squares are what we flagged as potential bus-on-shoulder candidate segments, meaning the shoulder is wide enough, the ramp conditions are safe enough, and there is a bottleneck. After completing an in-depth look at where bus-on-shoulder could exist, we created a summary map located on this slide on the right to show ODOT leadership and partnering transit agencies. The segments on the map in purple are those that ODOT assessed to be in good condition currently, while those in pink would require some improvements. In consultation with our three partnering transit agencies, we selected three geographically different corridors to conduct more in-depth analysis and plan to launch pilots. Next slide, please. Next came the fun part, actually taking buses out onto the shoulder. This photo is from a field test with SMART heading southbound on I-5 in between Nyberg Road and the I-205 interchange. I think my favorite part was opening up Google Maps when we were on I-205 to see where we were currently on I-205 in red, meaning that there was congestion, due to drivers slowing to look at what a bus and two crash trucks were doing driving in the shoulder on a Monday morning at 10 a.m. with no other traffic around us. But besides the enjoyment of creating a spectacle on Portland's freeways, when conducting the field tests, we quickly learned how our technical assessment of quote unquote ideal conditions played out in reality, in terms of needed shoulder width for a bus operator to feel comfortable, and in terms of space needed to merge near high volume on-ramps or multi-lane ramps. While two of the three pilots received green lights and moved forward, the field test on US 26 quickly snowballed due to rounded shoulder widths and a bus fishtailing around the windy road. It will likely come as no surprise that the freeways are older and narrower near the city center, as Megan was just mentioning about I-5 in the Rose Quarter. So despite having the highest need for congestion solutions, they also pose the most obstacles to congestion solutions. Next slide, please. In conclusion, we've already launched one pilot on I-205 in conjunction with the interstate bridge closure that will continue for 1 year. We have another pilot planned to launch in 2021 with SMART on I-5 near Wilsonville, and another pilot in the works on US 26 with TriMet that's currently stalled due to the spatial constraints of fitting a bus safely on the shoulder. The major projects team is currently working on another traffic performance report for Region 1 to be published by the end of the year, and the new potential pilots may emerge with new bottlenecks or different demand from transit agencies. One of the biggest lessons I learned as the main data cruncher and graphics producer is to conduct field tests early on in the process before investing too much time in a specific corridor. It's easy to look at a freeway section and say, we have a bus that's 9.5 feet with mirrors and a shoulder that measures 11 feet, that'll fit. But once you put a bus operator behind the wheel and ask them to thread that very narrow shoulder with other cars on the road, it is a different story. A field test is the quickest way to determine whether a shoulder segment is good to go or will need lots of work, such as restriping or widening. I also learned that without internal leadership support, our initial assessment of Portland's freeway conditions would have been archived and sat on a virtual shelf for 4 or 5 years. I distinctly remember attending the first formal Bus on Shoulder meeting with Region 1 leadership and being told by my former colleague, Rory Renfro, that we should be proud of our work but expect it to end there. Instead, to our surprise, we were asked whether we could have a pilot off the ground in 6 months. This directive from ODOT leadership changed our mindsets from statements of, we can't do this, to what do we need to do to make it happen, essentially tasking all team members to get creative and find solutions. Major Project is so proud to have spearheaded this effort, to have successfully launched a pilot in less than a year from completion of our initial assessment, and to hopefully have many more pilots coming down the freeway shoulders in the future. And with that, I believe now I'll turn it over to Brendan.
Great, thank you, Kerrie. Next slide, please. Well, thank you. That was great work, Kerrie, and I think this is going to dovetail really nicely into the brief discussion I'll have here, because I'm going to be very interested in answering people's questions and getting feedback on the Comprehensive Congestion Management Plan. So please go to the next slide, please. So here's the visual that we're using to unearth the CCMP, which is not to be confused with the term of art used by some planners called the Congestion Management Plan. This is a task that we were put on at the Urban Mobility Office by the Oregon Transportation Commission to take a really systematic and comprehensive look at the system that we have in the Portland metro region. So I want to first say that this is not an urban mobility map project list. This is ODOT. This is Region 1. We work very closely with Major Projects and others because it's going to take a really comprehensive effort, even with our partner agencies, as you will see listed here, to be able to manage a system in a way that increases mobility and meets some of our other goals that we have. So I'm not going to get into too much of the details around this. You will see some of the bus on shoulder pilots that are on this, as well as some of the other multimodal investments that we're taking a part in, as well as some of the ballot measure Metro T 2020 projects that are on state facilities as well. So we're going to see what happens with that here in November, adjust this map accordingly, and then overall manage the system with our best tool that we feel to manage the system, and that's going to be with the toll program. We presented this to the Oregon Transportation Commission 2 weeks ago and got their blessing to move forward on a couple of items regarding this, which was, first of all, don't look at these projects and programs in isolation. They are a part of a bigger plan. Each one of them relates to the other. They're all needed for us to meet this we have to manage congestion in the Portland region. So to do that, we need to, again, take that comprehensive look, understand that each one of these projects, as Megan articulated, have local impacts, and we are going to be very cognizant and diligent in how we address those, use the lessons learned that Megan talked about to make sure we're approaching the communities that we're doing our work in a way that meets their needs and values. And again, it kind of goes to our tagline for, I don't mean to set up our 11 o'clock breakout session, but the process is the project. So it's our little tagline for the Urban Mobility Office. So the Oregon Transportation Commission said, we want you to move forward on looking at a complete regional approach, especially as it relates to the toll program. We have listed here some of the current toll corridors and the expanded ones. The Transportation Commission did say, as a policy, they want the net revenues that are derived and created from a corridor to stay on the corridor. Obviously, we have 2 corridors here for that with Interstate 5 and I-205. They also tasked us with coming back in December with a implementation and financial plan for this strategic plan. So we have a lot of work ahead of us. It's going to be a busy holiday season for us here in November, but we'll be working closely with Assistant Director Brower on the financial piece in Region 1 and our regional partners on defining exactly what the corridor is as far as boundaries. That's been a big question as well. So that's another lengthy discussion that we'll likely have with our regional partners. We're looking forward to that. So there's a ton to unpack here. So I don't want to take up too much airspace here this morning. Rather answer people's questions and receive their comments. So with that, next slide, please. So we'll get right to it. So I'll turn it back over to our moderator.
Hello. I only have one question so far, so please feel free to type in your questions into Slido. The question that I have so far is about Bus on Shoulder. What's the plan for getting the word about Bus on Shoulder? This maybe hasn't been getting as much buzz as it could. Is that because it's still in a pilot?
Yeah, thank you for your question. We are currently working with our partnering transit agencies on a plan for kind of a social media blitz, as well as getting more information out there for ODOT, both internal staff to know that this is happening, as well as to spread the word that we're working with all of these different agencies. We're currently in the final stages of a contracting and procurement process, so that should be coming down the road soon. But there was definitely some notification on C-Trans, WashDOT's, and ODOT's website in conjunction with the Trunnion Bridge project about the I-205 pilot with the Abernathy Bridge. But yes, we're working on getting everything off the ground for the 2021 pilot with SMART down near Wilsonville off of I-5.
Okay, let's see. Questions are starting to come in here.
There's another question. This one came in through chat. Does the Urban Mobility Office see a future role outside of Region 1 to help with urban mobility issues elsewhere?
Sorry, double muted. Always remember that on Zoom. Great question. I think that is definitely a possibility. We're going to continue to be guided by the OTC, the commission. We have been told by leadership as well that we may be dispatched to other parts of the state when needed. So we look forward to doing that wherever the challenges may be, however we can be helpful to our colleagues in different parts of the state. So right now there's no plans on that, but I think we're standing ready as we're still kind of in the infancy of standing up the office. We feel like we'll be prepared in the future to help address issues and help our colleagues around the state.
Okay. Currently, we use shoulders for removing vehicles that have been in an accident or vehicles that have mechanical issues. Is there still space for those vehicles? Where should they go?
Yes, I didn't want to get too into the weeds in our short time today, but there is a very formalized concept of operations and plan for bus operators if there is anything obstructing the shoulder. So that includes a stalled vehicle, law enforcement, potential hazardous materials, tires in there. We like to joke about couch on shoulder because we had a great photo of a couch with someone sitting on it on a freeway shoulder for a while. That is in one of our earlier presentations, as well as bicyclists, because bicyclists are allowed to use areas of Portland's freeways. And so the plan is that the bus operator is supposed to move over at least 1,000 feet before an obstruction, or if they do not have that visibility due to a curve, as soon as they notice that obstruction, to merge back into the main line or the furthest right lane of traffic to avoid and prevent any potential collision with something that is in the shoulder, as well as to then report that obstruction. We are going to be conducting before and after studies, so I'll be helping to write a quarterly report. And one of our biggest concerns, of course, is the safety of, once again, bicyclists, pedestrians, other motorists, as well as allowing law enforcement to be able to do their job. And so that quarterly report will also help us quickly identify potential areas where there often are stalled vehicles or other situations, and then we can help the bus operators as well as our partnering transit agencies on how best to handle those situations moving forward. But there is a plan to protect stalled vehicles, law enforcement, bicyclists, once again, all of those situations, and the couch. No one wants to hit the couch.
Regarding bus on shoulder, are you familiar with how WashDOT was able to quickly implement bus on shoulder? And do we have anything to learn from their experience?
Yes, it's been really great because our first pilot that has been able to launch is partnering with WashDOT and C-Tran. And as many of you may be familiar with, C-Tran has been doing and WashDOT has been doing bus on shoulder on SR14 for a few years now. And so we actually are really looking to them to see kind of what sort of data they have been collecting, what has been working for them and what hasn't been, and we are utilizing their past experience and their past knowledge to help us to direct our future pilots. So it's been really great, particularly seeing how they are collecting the data, how the bus operator in the moment is signifying whether they're using the shoulder or not, how bus operators are communicating with others about potential safety hazards, obstructions, visibility issues due to weather, and we are helping to direct our other partnering transit agencies such as SMART into implementing those same measures, since C-Tran has had so much success and WashDOT has had so much success with theirs.
Was bus on shoulder used during the Trunnion project? Do we have lessons learned from that?
Yes, bus on shoulder is currently active. It initially was scheduled to start when Trunnion started on September 12th, but due to that initial delay because of the forest fires and wanting to make sure that evacuation routes were safe for anyone needing them, it was delayed a week until September 19th. So there was a little bit of a soft rollout on September 12th and then more formalized on September 19th. Since it's just 2 weeks into it, we don't have any hard data yet. We're looking at getting that data from both ODOT, CDOT, and WashDOT, or C-Tran, pardon me, and WashDOT in mid-November to conduct that quarterly report and have it finalized by December to discuss with ODOT leadership who have been working on this project, as well as with C-Tran and WashDOT, about what we're seeing in those first couple months. So all I can say, unfortunately, right now is that I know the shoulder is being used. There was an accident on September 19th, and we had reports that bus operators really enjoyed the ability to use that shoulder when there was an accident on the Abernathy Bridge. But otherwise, I unfortunately don't have any firm numbers for you as to how often it's being used.
Are there any additional lessons learned that you can share or best practices related to engaging with your affected stakeholders, especially the general public?
Megan, do you want to take the first crack at that one?
I was gonna say, I can go ahead and start with this one. Absolutely. And I think first and foremost, it is for Rose Quarter, a key lesson learned for us is to make sure that within your project team that you are incorporating and building partnerships with individuals that represent the communities that you are specifically trying to reach. So in the case of Rose Quarter, we have contracted with some community leaders and facilitators for the three committees that I mentioned. So the Executive Steering Committee, the Community Oversight Advisory Committee, and our upcoming Historic Albina Advisory Board to make sure that we are, again, putting into action our words. If the intent is to elevate voices of the historic Albina community, we want individuals as part of our project team that represent historic Albina community. They can help shift our community engagement from what's typically, I'd say, or historically has been transactional between government and the community to be more relational. one of the key things that we hear as part of Rose Quarter is just the strong and deep-seated distrust of the community with ODOT. And so by having key community members and leaders as part of your internal team can help you better understand what those issues of distrust or other elements may be, so that you can have more effective conversations and again, build stronger relationships moving forward. And then, you know, kind of typical, or maybe not typical, but standard practices that we're implementing, as well as just making sure that it's a two-way dialogue on our community engagement, that we're very clear and not just saying, hey, what's your feedback on X, Y, and Z? It's, hey, what's your feedback on X, Y, and Z? And then when you give it to us, here's what we are going to do with it. And so as part of that, we're in the process of creating what we're calling an accountability matrix that's going to go up on our project website, that will document and be a living matrix of the different community feedback that we're receiving, and then clearly documenting what we are doing with it, or clearly describing if we can't do something with it, why. To not only hold ourselves accountable to implement that feedback, but so that folks can see and track and come back with other comments. And then, you know, it's obviously really hard during our COVID and pandemic environment, but making sure that in our engagement that we are going to the communities that we're trying to reach, meeting them where they are, when they are, and how they want to be met. So we've worked, you know, through doing focused discussion groups prior to our teleworking and pandemic world, and are exploring some new online open house options and leveraging technology to make sure that we're reaching community members. So that's what we've been doing on Rose Quarter. Again, we have a lot more work to do. We have a lot more community building and relationship building to do, but I think we are starting to see some of the successes and how our actions are moving forward with our values and creating some positive community engagement items.
Okay, this question has the most votes at the moment. Is there a plan to include a toll-free freeway option to traverse the Portland metro area from north to south?
Well, we're pretty early on in that process. With I, we're still in the comment period for NEPA, and with I-5 in the preliminary environmental linkages stage. So I think those are questions that are going to be answered. There's going to be a robust dialogue with the community, as Megan was, I think we want to have with the toll program as well as Interstate Bridge, that I think Assistant Director Perkins said yesterday, the power of conversation, the power of relationships, the power of understanding. We want to use that with the toll program to decide exactly what it's going to look like. So that's a sort of long answer to that short question, which is that still remains to be seen, and those details are still going to be worked out as far as how that system is going to be set up. So, but thank you for that question.
Will the I-5 project cost estimate be updated again as the project progresses and further design is completed?
Yeah, absolutely. So the cost to complete report, again, was required as part of House Bill 2017. And we did it based on our current 15% design. And so as we move forward, working with the community, better understanding what our design decisions will be as we get to the 30% mark, we'll be doing updated cost estimates at 30%, 60, 90% design marks to get us to our guaranteed maximum price for the project. This will be done in consultation with our CMGC construction management general contractor that is joining us by next month to kind of, again, bring that contractor lens to the estimates, and then also working with our owner's representative team, and we bringing on an independent cost estimator as well for those future cost validations.
Given the need for the TriMet Southwest Corridor project needing funding through a ballot measure, are there any contingency plans if this does not pass?
Sorry for the pun here, but I think that's another bridge we're going to cross when we get to it. We're going to see what happens on November 3rd. If we have to recalibrate, we've through our jurisdictional transfer, we have made a commitment as an agency to the project financially, but obviously that's not going to get it over the line. So I know we'll be seeing what happens on November 3rd and kind of putting our heads together with our partners afterwards, because it's a key part of the system to manage congestion throughout the Portland region. So another good question.
Will the Rose Quarter project include tolling elements? How are those projects being looked at together?
Yeah, so as Brendan mentioned with the comprehensive congestion management plan, you know, in order to address congestion in our region, in our state, we have to hit it from multiple different approaches using all the tools in our toolbox. So the Rose Quarter project is part of that. One of the tools is the operational and safety improvements with the auxiliary lanes and shoulders. The Rose Quarter project does not include tolling. But simultaneously with the toll program that Lucinda Broussard is managing and Brendan spoke about, is looking at the different corridors. What could the potential termini be for the toll program on the I-5, the 205 corridors? What type of tolling would be appropriate? So all of that work is underway. And together, those two efforts, along with the other elements that are shown on the congestion management map, will really help us achieve our urban mobility and congestion management goals moving forward.
So you mentioned that there's some gawking or curiosity about bus on shoulder. Will that be a problem going forward, or how will you manage the public's just curiosity about this new thing that's happening on the freeway?
Yes, no, that is a great question. Like I said, it was so much fun doing the pilots because, you know, we had multiple crash trucks out with us and so many people from ODOT to make sure that our bus operators were being safe, and, you know, the public knew kind of, okay, we need to stay out of this lane and not get in the shoulder following these crazy people on a bus. But I think that once again ties back into this need to have a really strong social media campaign and get the word out there with our partnering transit agencies. Luckily, with our first pilot with C-Tran and with the Trunnion project, a lot of C-Tran riders who are using the I-205 Abernathy Bridge are already really familiar with bus on shoulder, given that it was already happening on SR14 prior to launching our pilot. And so that public outreach was a little bit more muted than what we're anticipating we will do with our SMART pilot and with any other future pilot. And so it's going to be a big effort for likely for an outside consultant to help us make sure that the public knows about this. You know, we've been in consultation with law enforcement as well, of course, about, you know, please don't pull over this bus driver, they're allowed to be in the shoulder. You know, discussing all of those other potential elements that can happen when you are running a new program that is unfamiliar to drivers in the Pacific Northwest. But we also, of course, have been looking at past examples of successful bus on shoulder programs in the Midwest, in the South, on the East Coast. And for the most part, we have seen those programs that have existed for upwards of 40 years have seen very little issue once the public is well versed in the fact that buses are going to be driving on the shoulder. So it takes a little bit of effort that at this moment we have not yet publicly done, given that the pilot isn't starting for almost another year in our other new corridor.
Similarly, will the bus drivers receive additional training if they're going to be driving on routes where bus on shoulder is being utilized? And will they have to actually weave and merge more because of this, or obstacles and et cetera?
Yes, there is a pretty comprehensive training program that they need to go through that our partnering transit agencies have both agreed to and are already implementing in the case of C-Tran. And it's mostly about getting bus drivers out into the shoulder, making sure that they feel comfortable. Any opportunity to use bus on shoulder is decided by the bus operator, given the parameters of speed, safety, visibility, multiple different elements that I can go into further detail with if someone is interested at a later date. But that a bus operator who does not feel comfortable for whatever reason can choose not to use the shoulder, even if conditions are appropriate at that moment. It's really mostly about the safety of the bus operator, of the public, of those riding the bus, all of those things. And so we're looking at how CTRAN has already been training its drivers prior to ODOT jumping into this, and using a similar method for SMART and potentially for any other partnering agency in the future. Oh, and there was a question about weaving in and out. Yes, so there are guidelines for how far of a distance a bus operator needs to begin merging back into the main line of traffic. It's about 1,000 feet before, say, a multi-lane ramp or a high volume ramp. And so those parameters are established prior to any bus operator going in, driving in the shoulder, as well as part of that training that a bus operator would do prior to actually taking passengers out onto the shoulder.
Okay. There's a couple more questions, but they're complicated questions and we're just about out of time. So we might have to come back to those or address them in another format, I think. So it's 10:46. So thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, our presenters, and thank you, everybody, for participating in this session.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Have a great fall forum.